everyone. I'm excited for our fourth and final workshop. Thank you all for being here. It's exciting. It's an exciting moment, but also a sad moment. I hope you all sign up again. We're going to have new speakers. You're going to be matched with a new mentor. We're going to have new content. I think you're going to really enjoy it. But our workshop 4 topic is how to manage conflict in the workplace. This is a very big deal. And I think to maybe ask an early question, just to get the ball rolling on this topic, is when you're in a work environment, the question I have for you is, how do you want others to feel about you? Write in the comment section. I love to learn about it, because what's so critical is the intentionality that we have about how others feel about us. I think so often when we're in a stressful work environment, we think about blaming other people. We think, well, XYZ person wants to sabotage me. They're always trying to undercut me or undermine my work, or they just do these things just to frustrate me. But more often than not, I find that they don't do it on purpose. More often than not, I find that they don't even know that what they're doing is frustrating you. And so what I really want to open up for in terms of this conversation, this question, is how do you want other people to feel about you? Because there might be something that you do that frustrates somebody else. You don't even realize that that's what you're doing, because you maybe haven't set an intentionality. It just was the most convenient for you to do thing for you to do at the time, so you just kept on doing it. You had no idea that this frustrated other people. So write in the comment section, how do you want other people to feel about you at work? Do you want other people to think of you as reliable or dependable or hardworking or kind, friendly, always optimistic, nice, always having a good, positive, upbeat personality? How do you want other people to perceive you? I'd love to learn about that, because ultimately, this is your reputation. This is how other people perceive you. And this is so critical, because I think it's so often, it's so easy to blame others for the things that they do that frustrate us, but it's so easy to be blind to how what we could do might frustrate them. So if we can set an intention for how we want other people to feel about us, if we think about that every single morning when we go into work, our likelihood of actually fulfilling and embodying that persona, that person, increases substantially. So I want to ask the question, how do you want other people to feel about you at work? Now, this is critical, because ultimately this means that you're going to have to remove any other personal baggage to make sure that you're still staying consistent with how you want other people to feel about you. It doesn't matter if you found out your grandma just got diagnosed with cancer, or that your dog just died, or that you're having rough things that are going on in your relationship. Does not matter, because at the end of the day, what matters is, are you able to stay consistent to who you said you wanted to be? And the person that is the most professional, the person that is really bringing it every single time, is the person that can stay the most consistent. Because if you start to let your personal stuff creep into your professional life, it's going to open you up to potentially not being the consistent person, the consistent intentionality that you've set for how you want other people to feel about you. And I think it's really important that you really work towards doing that, which leads to the 3 keys to success that I've shared with you in every workshop, which is your strategy, your story, and your state. And fortunately, we know how to get ourselves into a state conducive for being successful. No matter what is going on in our words, no matter how mad, sad, angry, dejected we're feeling about anything going on, we can get ourselves into an emotional state conducive for being happy, even if it's for a temporary period of time, through our motion. So what I want to do right now is I want you all to stand up, and I want you to shimmy it out. I want you to shake it loose. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. On the count of 3, scream. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out. Let it loose. Let it go. You've got nothing to lose. Who cares if other people are looking at you? You're probably in your house anyways. With all the coronavirus craziness going on, you're probably in quarantine. This is the time to let loose. Because here's the thing, what we know is that when you are able to do that, you're getting your blood moving, you're getting your blood flowing in your brain, you're releasing endorphins in your mind, you're getting yourself into a state conducive for being successful. So by doing that, you are putting yourself you're taking yourself from wherever you were, and you're putting yourself into a much more elevated status. That is how you stay consistent. No matter what you want other people to feel about you, if you can get yourself physically into a state conducive for being successful, other people are going to perceive you as whatever feeling you want to set for yourself. So that's critical. The other key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself for why you will or will not be successful? This is critical. If you tell yourself, well, I can't do that, or this is impossible, or I don't know if I have the abilities to do something like that, you're going to achieve the outcome that you've set for yourself. And that is ultimately going to lead to the outcomes that you put on yourself. So if you tell yourself why you're going to be successful, if you tell yourself why you're going to make it work, you might have a chance of actually going out and achieving the outcomes that you want to achieve. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are the things that you can do on a daily basis to get yourself there? So maybe if you think to yourself, how do I want other people to feel about me? Maybe if it's to be kind. What can you do that's really kind on a daily basis to really reinforce that feeling you want other people to feel about you? If you want other people to feel that you are hardworking or confident or reliable, what can you do on a daily basis that will embody, that will reinforce you being kind, hardworking, or confident, or reliable? What are those things that you can do to set yourself up for success? That is your strategy. Those are the things that you can do on a regular basis. Now, the reason why this all relates to conflict management in the workplace is because these intentions about how we want other people to feel about us is critical to what we actually manifest at work. Now, it's so easy to get into a rut. It's easy to get frustrated. It's easy for us to blame other people for our problems. But here is a great way. This workshop on conflict management is a great tool for you to leverage to help you overcome a lot of the issues that you've got and that you've essentially had for yourself at work. One of the biggest things that I'm a big believer, I'm a huge proponent of, is this concept called this concept called observation, feeling, need, request. This is the key to nonviolent communication, which you might think, I'm not getting violent in the workplace. That's okay. But what I've observed is that this is one of the best ways to totally diffuse a situation. Whether somebody gives you a snide comment at work that you just didn't appreciate, or somebody made an action that you felt like just didn't respect you, or your time, or your abilities, or that overall just frustrates you. As opposed to getting pissed off, yelling at them, exploding at them, being passive aggressive and talking shit about them behind their back, or anything that does not target the issue head on, any of those actions are not productive. Observation, feeling, need, request is productive and can help you come to a solution. Now, here's how observation, feeling, need, request works. It literally follows the exact formula that I've laid out. Observation. What is the thing that you have observed? Now, the key with observation is that it's got to be undeniable. It happened, but there's no emotion to it. So, for example, the thing that really frustrates you is when John interrupts you at work, and let's say he just interrupted you 3 times in the course of a conversation. You can say, hey, John, I was hoping that we could chat for a minute. John says, yeah, sure, what's going on? You say, hey, so one thing that I observed is that in the course of this conversation, you interrupted me 3 times. Now, you don't say, you were being a jerk, you were being a dick, you interrupted me and really threw me off. Like no feelings tied to it, just you interrupted me 3 times. I started talking about this, and then you cut me off and started talking about that. I started talking about this, you cut me off, started talking about that, and then I started talking about this, and you cut me off and started talking about that. It's the key is that it's undeniable. It happened. It's something that John can say, you know what? You're right, I did interrupt you 3 times. Now, doesn't matter what his excuses were for interrupting you. The next part is the feeling. Now, the feeling is, how do you actually feel about that? You're not here to call out John and call him out for being a jerk. You're here to say, hey, when I am interrupted, I feel belittled. I feel disrespected. And now this is the big part, your need. Now, don't elaborate, by the way, when I say those feelings, don't elaborate on them. Just say, hey, I felt belittled. I feel belittled and disrespected. That's it. Everyone can relate to the feelings of being belittled and disrespected. Now, your need is critical because your need is like a higher level need that you've got, that you believe the world should work like this. In a work environment, the work environment should work this way, and that everybody can agree to that. And so your need is, you know what, hey, my need is that I work in a work environment where I feel like when I'm speaking that I'm being respected and that I'm at least being heard. And now that's critical. If you put that out there, John can probably agree to that. The last part is request. Now, what is a request that you can make to John so then he can start to take action that ultimately it can formulate change? Now, you don't want to make it something that's concrete. You don't want to say, hey, my request is that you never interrupt me again. Unrealistic. Probably not going to happen. John may interrupt you sometime in the future, especially if he's weaning off this because it was a habit. But if your request is, hey, my request is that when I'm speaking, that you're conscious of what I'm saying and that you try your best to refrain from interrupting me when I'm speaking. That's a very fair and valid request. John can probably agree to that because you're not asking for too much. You're just asking for him to be conscious of it. So that is how observation, feeling, need request works. It ultimately just lays out exactly what the thing that happened was, how you felt about it, without calling out John or calling out the other person or talking about how bad of a person they were. Sharing what your need is and your request for how they can implement that for the future. That is critical. Now, we're going to talk a lot about this later on tonight in this workshop with our guest speaker. Our guest speaker is an expert on conflict management in the workplace. I think you're going to really enjoy what our guest has to say. But those are my personal observations about what I've observed to work in observation in terms of conflict management. The last thing that I want to share before we jump into our guest speaker is this importance of teaching somebody else something that you've learned. One of the things that I've observed is that when people go through this workshop, when people go through this program, 20 is the magic number. If you tell 20 or more people about something you learned in this program, by the way, it doesn't necessarily need to be that you taught them a full seminar. It could be that you mentioned to your significant other or a friend, a peer, a colleague, hey, I learned about this thing called observation, feeling, need, request in Ambition and Motion Workshop. That could be it. We know that when people tell 20 or more people about something they learned, anything they learned in this program, their likelihood of achieving their professional goals increases exponentially. And the reason why is because teaching something to somebody else reinforces that information in their mind. And so by doing that, by telling 20 or more people, the likelihood that this is going to stick, the likelihood that you are going to apply it in your professional environment, and the likelihood that you're going to achieve the professional goals that you've set for yourself, because that's been such a big focus of this program, increases exponentially. So what I would love for you to do after this workshop is to find somebody that you can teach something that you learned from this workshop this evening. I think that will really help reinforce what you're learning in this program, really help you make the most out of this experience. I'm so excited to dive into our guest speaker this evening. I really hope that, and I really encourage you to participate in the program. You're going to get a new mentor. We're going to have new content. We're going to have new speakers. I think you're really going to enjoy it. This has been a pleasure working with you all, and I look forward to the next steps.
Everybody, welcome to the next workshop that we have for you all this evening. The topic of our workshop today is how to have healthy conflict in the workplace, and just really how to overcome challenges that we have in the workplace, how to have healthy conflict with team members, how to overcome conflict in the workplace. Ultimately, conflict is okay. In the workplace, sometimes conflict happens. And in fact, sometimes it's encouraging. You have no conflict in your workplace at all. It's likely boring, probably not challenging you and not giving you opportunities to grow. However, there's healthy conflict and then there's unhealthy conflict. And fortunately for you all today, we've got a great guest speaker with us to talk about her experiences working through conflict and just overcoming conflict at work and just making the workplace a better place. We've got Lizza Coffey with us here today to share with us a little bit about her experiences. Lizza, thanks for being here.
Hi, Garrett. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today with you all.
Sweet. So Lisa's also in our executive mastermind group. And Lisa, if you could just brief background of yourself just to share with the students who are watching this today.
Sure. I am currently a learning and development specialist. I work for a business that is a full group, and we administer medical benefits to municipalities, but I am solely dedicated to our internal employees. So I create all the training programs for them. And before that, I had a long-term career in tech. I also was a global program manager for this tech company. And then prior to that, I was also an account manager for a footwear company. So lots of different industries there.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that, Lisa. So let's dive in. We're talking about how to work through conflict in the workplace. I guess if you could maybe share with us a little bit about your experiences working through conflict in the workplace. Have you ever had a scenario where you had a conflict? What'd you do about it? What went well? What went wrong? I think the what went wrong is a really critical part about that, because I think so often it's it's so easy to have hindsight after the fact, but I think in the moment you become so much more relatable when you're like, I was really frustrated. I reacted instead of like rationally thinking through it and doing this. but this is what I learned from that. I think if you could share this story of like what happened, what went well, what went wrong, and what you learned from it, that would be really cool. And I always like to preface the what went wrong, because it makes you human. It shows that, hey, it's okay that you had that mode of thinking during that moment.
Of course. So one example, as a global program manager for this tech company, I had a situation that impacted the allocation of resources and costs for a digital marketing campaign. And I had submitted a requisition for a specific project manager to work on this digital campaign with a specific client. And the operations manager wasn't working with me to assign the person that I requested. The person that I requested was a senior project manager, had already been assigned to another project, hadn't started that yet, but that client had specifically requested him. What he wanted to do was assign a junior project manager to my project. And because he wanted to give this person more experience, help them develop their skill set, and also they would be more cost effective. So my client had a smaller budget that year. That also was a determining factor. And so, there were a couple of things there. It impacted cost, it impacted resources, and I also had to make sure that it wasn't impacting the quality or the integrity of this campaign. So what I had to do was think about how can I work with this person to either switch the dynamics, right, of swaying them in order to have what I wanted as an outcome, or how could I work with them collaboratively? Because it has to be a win-win.
Just so then I can clarify, work with them on this outcome was either get them to increase their budget so then you could hire someone a little bit more experienced, or say, okay, I'm okay with the fact that we're going with someone a little bit more junior, but here are the rent parameters that I'm looking for in bringing someone on board. Is that was that the conflict?
Yeah, the conflict was, bringing this junior person in because I didn't have enough dollars. So how can I increase my budget, right, to get the senior person in? But that senior person was already allocated. Like they weren't even in the ballpark, right? So, and I was trying to think, okay, how am I going to make this work? Well, one of the reasons the operations manager wanted this person was because they wanted to give them more experience, which I'm all for. I think that's great. However, this wasn't necessarily the project that I wanted them to do that on for my client, right? So what we ended up doing was we ended up allocating the project manager that was a junior, and with some research and talking to my boss, what we did was we had them assigned to a senior PM so that they would consult with them weekly and help them, as their backup, learn more about how they do things. And that senior PM actually wasn't going to cost me anything because they were part of a sponsored company program that was on skill set development. So it's kind of a win-win for both of us, It actually was a win-win. And then by doing that and scoping this project with a junior PM, that enabled a cost saving so that the client was able to use that for other marketing initiatives. So they really got their bang for their buck. And the junior PM got experience. The senior PM was able to work on their skill set development and mentor. And it worked out better. Now, it wasn't the initial outcome that I thought, right? Because I was like really determined to use the PM that I knew that was going to just, be a rock star on it. But it ended up working out really well.
So that's interesting. So it sounds like there was a couple of things there, and I would love to dive into the interpersonal because that's the part that I think will be really, critical in this whole story. But it sounds like in this scenario, what happened was you had a mindset of how you wanted this to go, and ultimately you needed to adjust and pivot your mindset to maybe adopt a new way of doing things, and it turned out working out.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I always kept in mind was that I had to always have the integrity and the best interest of the company and the client, right?
Mhm.
How do I do that? So you have to be open, and sometimes the solutions that I think are the best at that time may not necessarily be the best down the road, right? Or I might be capping that potential of something that is a good solution. So, it was really important to be able to be open to that and also find a way that I could make it a win-win, and work with with the operations manager.
This sparks a question I've got for the students that I think you brought up a really good point. Share a story or an example, students, if you could, in the comment section, share a story or an example of a time where you were in a scenario where you didn't end up doing the thing that you thought you wanted to do. You ended up adopting some other style of doing it and it ended up working out. Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it because I think, Lizza, what you're sharing is a unique element of resilience paired with just being able to be open-minded to a new way of doing things. I think it's easy for like in a casual conversation to say that we're open-minded, but when it's heated, when times are stressful, when we're constantly putting out fires and we've got maybe like a one-track mind of like this is how things should be going, it can be really hard to adopt a new way of doing things. What I'd be curious about in this scenario, how was the interpersonal, like how was your interaction with your colleague or your boss, the one that was proposing the new way of doing things? How did you go about conveying your disagreement in a respectful manner? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. So I think one of the first and foremost things, because I'm very analytical, is to take a step back, because yeah, I have already an outcome in mind, right? And of course, the power of negotiation comes at play, right? But it has to be a win-win. So one of the things that I learned much later in hindsight is to develop those relationships and get to know people on a personal level in other departments. Everybody's an internal client. Get to know them before a crisis. When you start to work with somebody and you only know them because you've hit a crisis, that can be challenging.
Yeah, it's like if the only reason why you're calling me is when you are in a major crisis, I don't want to answer your call. There's no personal connection there. There's no trust. There's no relationship. That makes total sense.
Exactly. And, I have to put myself in other people's shoes because that, you know, operations manager had responsibility and he was managing his scope of work with his team, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to put myself in his shoes to understand what he's going through. It's not personal. This is business to business, right? Although sometimes we can let our emotions carry, us, and we can get away from that. But I think one of the things that really worked to my advantage was that I was able to talk to him, and say, "Hey, I want to come up with a solution here. I've been racking my brain about this, and I'm trying to come up with something that would be viable for both of us. I want it to be a win-win." And I think that first and foremost, coming to the forefront with, I want to I want to work together. Let's work on this. Let's figure this out instead of like, hey, I've got a solution. This is the way I want it to go. Really helped.
I think that's a really smart way of looking at things. How do you handle scenarios when the other person on the other side has no idea what they've asked for or what they've done is frustrating or conflicting with your way of doing things? So I think that happens all the time where it's like that classic, like there's a Key and Peele skit, which is a comedy skit where it's like two friends texting each other, but one of them is interpreting it in a very like generous, fun, friendly way, and the other one's interpreting it in a very passive aggressive, negative, mean way. And so these two guys meet up to hang out with each other, and one is like really ticked off and it's got like a baseball bat ready to hit the other one. The other one's like, "Oh my gosh, you remember my post-apocalyptic Jackie Robinson costume?" And I guess the point I'm making is so often conflicts get lost in translation because the one person has no idea that what they've asked for is a detriment to the other person. One other example, like a workplace example of this, I see a classic time of CEOs where they do things and they say, it'd be really cool or it'd be really awesome if we could do this. What most CEOs don't realize is that by saying it would be really awesome if we could do this is the amount of stress it puts on anybody else at the team, because no one else knows or wants to challenge the CEO because they're like, well, you write my paycheck. I don't want to like get fired here. Like, are we going to do this in the next like 2 weeks, or is this going to be like something that's done in the next 2 years? Like, how do we prioritize this sort of task and this sort of work? And like, how much energy should I put into it? If that's not given, it can create a lot of internal conflict with team members. How do you go about approaching someone when you've got a conflict and they don't realize it's a conflict, and getting them to understand where your side of thinking is without disrespecting them? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I think one of the things is you have to be relatable and authentic. You know, they may not have any clue as to what you're going through or what you do or how it's affecting you. So first of all, especially in workplace conflict, you have to look at what is the impact? Is it affecting resources, people, salary, products, services? So I think you can address that first by saying, hey, listen, this is my frustration. This is how it's affecting me. If you could bring a little humor into that, because a lot of times I find that by being a little self-deprecating, that kind of makes it a little bit, bring some levity to it. And also being relatable. This isn't easy for me. I'm a little frustrated. Don't take it personally. I'm just trying to figure this out. I think that really helps. Now, again, someone could just say like, you know what? It doesn't matter. This is what I'm set on. This is what we're going to do, right? I think that then you have to be like, well, I'm going to disagree with you, but I'm going to agree in the fact that we can amicably figure something out and respect each other. Because at the end of the day, what's at stake here? What's the bigger solution here?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that makes sense. I love students ask you a question again, post in the comments section. Have you ever had a boss ask you to do something that they didn't realize it just overloaded your plate? If so, what happened? How'd you handle it? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn more. I think one thing I'm a big fan of, especially when it comes to like a boss-employee relationship and you feel like your boss has asked you to do too much, is to clarify what is already on your plate. You kind of alluded to that before, but I'm a big fan of the practice saying like, hey, boss, I'm more than happy to make this a priority A task. I'm currently working on task A, B, and C right now. I can make this priority A and move tasks A, B, and C down to B, C, and D, but that might delay my ability to get those things done. Where would you put this on the priority list, just so that I can understand what should I prioritize and what is most important? I think that concept and that interaction is such a powerful interaction between boss and direct report, because so often the boss has no idea of what they've asked you to do and how much time it takes and really what's on your plate when it comes to those sorts of things. And if you clarify all the things that are on your plate and how much time it's going to take to do those things and what delays you could expect if you pre-prioritize some new task onto that plate, you are able to get them to more or less understand and empathize, like, uh-oh, I maybe need to reevaluate my expectations because I said I want you to get this thing done by the end of the week. I forgot that you're already working on tests A, B, and C, which are far more important than this new task that I put on your plate. If it's not by the end of the week, instead it's more like 2 weeks out, that's okay. I can live with it. But I think that sort of mental process and understanding is really critical for your boss to have, because if you don't have that conversation, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be stressed out, you're going to burn out, you're not going to have your nights and weekends. You're probably going to take it on your friends and family, the people you spend time with outside of work, because you're feeling stressed out about it. And all it really required was just having a conversation, just properly setting expectations. But on that note, Lizza, is there ever a time to avoid conflict? Like, is there ever a time that it just makes more sense to avoid the conflict than to address it head on?
yes and no.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what I think. So, first and foremost, work is always continually changing, it's never static, right? So, what we think conflict right now may not be a conflict 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road, right? So, what I always do first is think, okay, what is the urgency of this? How urgent is this? And does this align with the company's organizational objectives and goals? Because if it doesn't align with the best interest of the company or your team or your resources that you're working with, then how high on the priorities are going to be, right?
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to be able to influence your boss or the people that you work with, for that, or in leadership that, hey, I need to buy in for this budget, or, I need these additional resources, if it doesn't really align with one of their goals. So first and foremost, does it align with the goals? How urgent is it? And what's at risk? What is it impacting? So if it's all those things, if those things tick off yes, 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 then it's, address it right away. Now, when do you not address conflict? When is it not well, minimize it, right? And that's when I look at, okay, after I've checked all those things off, is this something that will end up working itself out? Because a lot of times it does. In the end, because things change continually, it will pretty much work itself out. Now, is it going to work out to what you wanted, what I want, or what I wanted to that outcome? It may not, but it could also work out to something even better. So, being adaptive, agile, and resilient, to being open to that means that I'm not necessarily going to, everything is not an issue. Everything is not a conflict right away. And I really do feel that you have to pick your battles.
That's a good point. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point about picking your battles. Because if you're constantly going to battle every single time, you become the person who cried wolf, the metaphorical boy who cried wolf of just, okay, every time, this person has a beef with every new thing that we implement or every new change that we're trying to do, which means that you're not going to be involved in the change and you're going to get steamrolled every single time because you are ostensibly workplace annoying.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is be able to ensure that we're picking our battles wisely. But at the same time, if there are things that we feel are unfair or frustrating or challenges, we should and should not shy away from that. I guess, this leads to my next question for you. Who are your mentors? Like, who do you go to when you have this conflict? Because I think in the moment when we feel frustration, it's really easy to jump to conclusions right away and immediately be white hot angry. I know certainly I've gotten to those points again before, and you feel defensive and you're like, oh, this person's really frustrating me, whatever. But then, do you go to somebody, do you have a mentor or a group of people or anyone that you go to just kind of help you rationalize, think about it, think through the scenario and really put it together of, okay, you know what, maybe I should look at it from a different lens and that might help me better process it, or maybe reinforce like, hey, you know what, you've got every valid right to be frustrated and this is maybe the way you should approach it. Like, who's your support system in that?
I have a really good support system. So first and foremost, I have a great boss, and I can say this. She knows it. I think she's fabulous, and she's been a fabulous mentor to me. I also have someone in another department that is a mentor to me because it's good to bounce off ideas and have someone be very objective, right? That really helps me. And I have, through my professional organization that I'm a member of, a couple of people that I can pick up the phone or send a quick text to be like, what do you think about this? Hey, SOS, on the phone. I need some advice. Can I call you in 15 minutes? because I can vent to them, you know, and they have enough experience and advice to be like, I'm going to walk you off the ledge. You know, let's think about this. They're going to be objective. Let's look at the facts instead of the emotion.
I think that
And
objectivity is huge. Yeah.
huge. And you have to have those. And even by having a friend too, that sometimes you can talk to, you know, that's outside of that, because we, you know, we all share the same experiences. It's all about communication. How do we work with each other? How do we relate with each other? You know, and doing our best on a day to day. So
Yeah.
I do have great mentors.
And I think it's great that you identify both in the workplace and outside of the workplace people that you can go to, because I do think that's so powerful. I know I personally have an entrepreneurial emotional support group. In fact, I'm going to my entrepreneurial emotional support group dinner tonight. So I'm really looking forward to it. But it really helps to have that group where they can say like, you know, Garrett, I think you might want to look at this in a different way. Or they can say, man, that really stinks. Here's maybe some ways you can think about it and like work through it to get to the end result you're looking for. So I guess maybe I'd love to ask the students a question. Who is in your support system? Who do you go to when times are challenging, things are tough? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn more. So Lizza, we've talked about support systems. We talked about conflict. I guess what I'd be curious to know is, how do we become self-aware if we're creating conflict for other people in the workplace? Like, how do you practice that, like, self-awareness of maybe a self-audit of, okay, maybe they're frustrated. Like, how do you parse through the other team members' communication with you, where maybe you're their boss or you're above them in the organizational hierarchy, so they don't want to challenge your way of thinking, but at the same time, something you said or something you did frustrate them, and maybe they haven't communicated the most clearly that they're frustrated. How do you go about parsing through that and deciphering that? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I think you have to know your audience, and that's really important so that you can check yourself. Because if you know your audience, you can read them a little bit better. There's also, you know, nonverbal communication. Like all of a sudden, if they're shutting down and they're, you know, they have that glazed look, then you know right then, like you've just lost them, right? Something's happening, something's up. And I hope that I am approachable enough and open enough. And I also reiterate that I have an open door policy. It's a little bit difficult for people who work virtually now, because we have this interaction all the time, you know. So we have to be even more communicative of how can I help? How can I be of service? How can I, you know, understand and you be able to communicate to me? I think that's one way. Additionally, being self-aware is just a constant work in progress. And whatever we can do, you know, for instance, being part of the Ambition and Motion Mind Group, that really helps me and keeps me in check. It's true. And also being part of, you know, this professional organization that I'm in, I learn all the time different approaches and different techniques, right? How to have more empathy. Empathy is huge. Have more compassion. I had a situation where someone today was not able to join a meeting because they had something come up personally, and this was a pretty important and crucial meeting. But something happened. Things happen. Things come up. So, you know, learning and having we're a work in progress. So that's all. You know, whatever you could do. How can you do that? By, you know, talking to your friends, getting more feedback, hopefully you can get enough feedback from people that they feel they can talk about it. Now, it's a little bit more challenging, I think, when it's someone that is a direct report, because they may not want to talk about those things. But if you have a good rapport with your team or with the other people that you work with, then at least by saying, you know, I'm not feeling this. How can we talk about it? I think the more open and authentic and real that you can be with someone, the more the relationship can be enriched and you can be a better leader and also, person that you work with.
I think it's such good insight. Yeah, I think two big things you point out there: power of vulnerability and giving the generous assumption. It's so easy to judge ourselves on our intentions and others on our perceptions. And if we can give the generous assumption to what other people are going through, that is huge. However, on the flip side of all that, someone in our mastermind group meeting earlier today shared the book, The Speed of Trust, and the high level Cliff Notes version of what he was getting at was, if you want to build trust with someone, do what you say you're going to do, whatever you say it is. Now, granted, if you're in a if you're in a scenario and then all of a sudden you've got a family member that passes away or something extenuating happens, totally understandable if you miss a meeting, like that makes sense. But if like your extenuating circumstances happen regularly, people lose trust in you. People don't trust you because then they can't rely that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And so I think there's some power to that. And yeah, I think that's really helpful in the workplace. Well, Lizza, this has been a really good workshop. Are there any final notes or tips that you'd like to share with the students before we log off?
Sorry about that. 1 second.
No, all good. I think we've covered some really cool notes here. I think we've talked about one, the power of just like how to handle conflict in the workplace, of just saying, okay, how can we be creative about a challenge here? Instead of it being like me versus you, or you versus me, it can be okay, I have a way of thinking about it. You've got a way of thinking about it. How can I reprocess this so then we can create a win-win outcome for both of us, even if it wasn't the original way that I thought? I love that story that you shared earlier. And then I love that you dove into just how to utilize your support system to go about processing. Sometimes things can be frustrating. Sometimes we could have a boss that puts too much on our plate, and it's just really hard to communicate back like, hey, I've got too much going on right now. We need to take a step back or reprioritize some of my work. And then I love that what you shared about vulnerability and just the power of being open about your mistakes and the challenges that you're making, but also giving the benefit of the doubt to people as well. So any other high level thoughts that you've got for our students as before we sign off in terms of discussing how to handle conflict in the workplace?
I think that by, by not being so attached to outcomes, then not taking it personally is huge as well. And that enables you to become more resilient, more flexible to the changes, and actually allows you to do your best on the day-to-day. So those are just a few things.
Amazing. Well, Lizza, thanks for your time. Students, thank you all for your time. I really appreciate y'all being here. I look forward to hopefully seeing you next semester in the program. Have a good rest of your night.